So, a professional picture. And so what we need to do is connect with you guys to have time that the photographer can take a professional picture. What they're going to do with that is put it into basically a brochure that gives a little bit of a bio, professional picture of you, and your presentation, and that you basically were a part of this kind of professional event where different classes are having posters. So the intent is, the way that they're developing this whole event is that it can go into your resume as an opportunity where you share information and professional research or products that you've created as a student. So. Okay, having said all that, now is it still unclear?
I didn't get the email.
You didn't?
No, I mean, I'm in his 362 class,
Okay.
but is that meant to be?
So then maybe you didn't get it. I sent it to.
You sent it to the people that aren't already.
Right, just to those that didn't already have it. So if you already have your bio that you're doing, and if you already have a picture, and if you already have, and if you already know about the event, then yeah, you didn't get it for this class. But for this class, we're also going to participate in that event.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I guess I don't know why. It didn't,
I got married since then, so it's different.
that's why. Congratulations. All right.
It's all.
Okay, so I'm going to sit down. Evan, you want to lead us away here? So Evan is covering chapter 1.5. Okay?
This chapter is titled Participant Diversity, Curriculum Design, and Community Effects. And for this, they looked at 4 groups. There's a graph on page 103. It talks about it. It's Chamber of Commerce. It does a program, and then the State University Extension or extension offices, and then a foundation or nonprofit, and other non-land grant educational institutes like community colleges and stuff. So on the graph on 103, it shows like the average of age in one graph, average income in one, the employment status, and how many years they lived in the community. They average on all those. So that's just talking about the diversity within CLD or community leadership development programs. So like, what do you think, why is it important to have diversity in these programs?
True reflection of the community.
Diversity of ideas.
I've had some solutions to that too, diversity of solutions. People in the group learn to work with other people. Breaking frames of perspective.
It's a more welcoming environment.
Good. All right. Throughout this, the way they figured out if these things are improving the community and stuff, they took data through. They had 4 main things they looked at. One of them was CLD programs' role in improving the diversity of participants, and they got that through online surveys. And another thing they did was analyze the structure and content of these programs that were done through phone interviews with the program coordinator, so like pretty much what they did. And then they did gathered info on projects and activities done throughout the community, so like people that participated, they see what they did and how long the programs were, stuff like that. So community projects. And then on page 102, they talk about the stereotypes of different, like the 4 groups we talked about, the Chamber of Commerce, and how some of the findings of the research added up with them. So like the Chamber of Commerce sponsored programs are most likely to have participants who are male, younger, fully employed, highly educated, newer to the community, more likely to vote. Like they had these for all 4 groups we talked about. And in the findings, it talks about how that there was not as much difference in the leadership program's effects on people that did have higher education, that lived in the communities a longer amount of time, but it did have bigger impacts on the group of people such as the nonprofit foundations, which might be a higher average of age but a lower employment status and things like that. It was more focused towards poverty or less educated, and they had a bigger. This had a bigger reach to that type of socioeconomic status. And then Vanderberg and Associates summarized the 4 content areas identifiable in a number of CTO programs, which was personal leadership skills and resources, working with groups and organizations, understanding communities and community development processes, and understanding public policy processes. So these were things they looked at, and it's on a graph also. I wasn't real sure what was going on in the graphs, but it talks about with the outcomes that I talked about earlier, about how some groups got affected more than the others, but overall, leadership programs did help the community. And that's basically what this whole chapter is about. It's the different groups that gets affected by leadership and how some groups are affected more because of it. Anybody got any questions about that?
Yeah, so given that, who benefits most?
The lower, like the people that live in the community the least amount of time, lower education, that was the big group that got the most from leadership programs.
Who else? What about women? What about gender? What difference did it make?
Well, there was a lot more women participants.
Okay.
So it did help women more, but there was a lot bigger scale of women than there was men. And the people that had the programs that lasted longer also had a better outreach to people. It's like the longer the program, the more help it did for things you'd suspect when you got asked a question about these things. So a lot of the stereotypes paid off for this.
Well, and it seems like that's all good, but until somebody actually can document it, it just everybody assumes that those are the things that make a difference. So I see they went through and they did, married, unemployed, or employed, and what were some of the findings in those areas? Did they elaborate on it?
Well, the only thing unemployed was more likely to be in the lower educated group. That was one of the things. And what graph was that you were looking at?
I was just on page.
108?
That's it. Yep. I didn't know if they sometimes they'll put a lot of information out there. I didn't know if they commented.
Well, women were, like I said, you asked that question, women had the higher growth than the guys. I'm not sure exactly why that was. I do know they said there was a lot more females in it.
So what's one possible theory about why women would benefit more from a leadership program than guys?
Just as their first time to really show what they're capable of, I guess, after actually given the opportunity to be measured.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to remember if it's here or where I read it, but that was part of it, or at least they theorized that it was, that they didn't have, again, maybe the level of connections within and across the community.
I would think also the idea that women are more just like cohesion people. Like that's what we think a lot more togetherness. So I think that if we're going the community development route, women are more susceptible to agree with that type of model versus the more masculine idea of individual leadership.
Yeah, in this part where it talks about the women with higher gains in personal growth and efficacy. It doesn't say why they've got that there. There's a little short part about it. So I'm not sure.
I guess this is kind of along with what he said, men are already in the leadership roles in most communities, so there's more growth, potential for women within the community.
Yeah, as they're measuring growth, so you said, how long they've been in the community makes a difference, right? Because.
Yeah, instead of longer, the less they got.
The longer you've been in the community, the less that, meeting all these different community leaders has an impact for you, so your growth is lower. Age, they said.
Well, age also was a big part of that, because, the longer you live in the community, usually the older you are.
So, right, so the older people are and the longer they've been in the community, the less kind of growth they self-reported through the program. Why do you think, you said also economic, right?
Yes, they talk about, these negative relationships indicate that a college degree, annual income over 100,000, and longer time in community result in smaller increases in community scores.
So why do you think that is?
Well, they talked about the more education and maybe more leadership. They just had more leadership opportunities. They already had more, so they didn't have as much to improve on as people that didn't.
It is, it's all kind of a.
Yeah, say the ones,
yeah.
once you have one, they all connect.
But, right, so what they did then in their process was they tried to set values and kind of cross-identify how are these things related in terms of how people scored the growth versus based on demographics and its characteristics. And so it does tell us kind of what we expect, that the people that have the most growth potential in a leadership program are the first question you asked, why is diversity important? You may have a lot of diversity in your community, but you may have people that aren't represented well or that have an opportunity in the community to connect. And so if you can bring those into the program, they're likely to have a better opportunity for growth or experience more growth through that program. But yeah, gender, time in community, education income, age.
That was pretty much was it. That's
Yeah.
like that one graph had like married and other things like that.
And this is a real question because the learning style, active learning, what was that? I don't remember that they reported on that, did they? It's in the graph on page 112, but did they talk about that? Oh, and you also said, length of time in the program.
Yeah, at the time was a big. The longer the program, the more it helped.
What about the active learning? Did they?
I don't even see. Where did you find that at?
Well, I didn't see it in the text. I've seen it on page 112 on the chart. It says learning style, active learning, active and passive combined. I didn't remember reading anything about it, but.
No, I'm guessing I would just come through the analysis where they talked about like what the groups did and like the projects and stuff. Like the only thing I think that could tie to. Yeah, because they talk about the projects they do, so that'd be active learning, I assume, it has different capitals it lines up with. But I don't remember, I didn't read anything about that being talked about.
Here it is. It's on page 116, top of page 117. So that was where they were talking about the program content and how that can make a difference. And first it basically said the more contact hours, the better. Second, the more contact hours helping participants understand community development processes and what improved the community leadership outcomes. Third, more hours spent teaching participants about community development processes and greater likelihood of involvement in activities. And then fourth, so active learning or combination of active and passive learning results in a greater likelihood of involvement in activities and projects benefiting political capital. That's interesting.
So what exactly is the definition of political capital again?
Is what?
I know,
Say it again.
political capital. I know it's more than just the government.
what is the?
It is, so political capital, and I need to go back and see how they defined it for their assessment. But political capital, when you're studying the capitals, is about involvement in decision making, having a voice in setting priorities and agenda for the community, as well as the structural kind of local government systems, but it's also about people's sense of power and access to be a part of the decision-making process.
And I guess that does make sense. The idea that if you're empowered and you're learning, you're gonna be feel more empowered to.
So, right, and that was that thing about agency, being able to feel like you can make choices and you play a role in the local government or the local, whatever happens, engaging with your community. And so extension programs are more likely to lead to the initiation of human and cultural capital projects. That's awesome. While chamber is more active with financial capital activity projects. So the takeaway there, again, it's all kind of just what you expect, but what it's saying there is that extension programs tend to focus on human needs, cultural, social aspects, and the chamber's more financial, economic development type projects. So last thing in the kind of that summary, the implications for rural community development. Was there anything that you wanted to highlight from that?
What page is that?
Just the
It's
kind of
117.
summary, yeah, on page 117. And I'm only asking because I haven't read this for a while. So I didn't know if there was something that jumped out.
I guess I need to say it's based off the 6 key community leadership indicators: the personal growth and efficacy, community commitment, shared future and purpose, community knowledge, civic engagement, and social cohesion. That was the 6, I guess you'd almost call them goals we measure off of.
Right. And it helps increase their leadership capacity in those areas.
So that, it's just like how that in turn helps the 7 capitals of community.
Good. Any other questions for Evan? Nicely done. Thank you. Yeah, so, what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about the upcoming test. And as we get toward that, we'll talk about the other readings. This is the same one, but have you guys logged on, downloaded this, it's on the calendar? It's the Leadership and Community Capacity Building Inventory and Analysis of Curriculum Tools.
First time.
Yeah, you can have one of those. I didn't bring enough copies for everybody, but what I want you to do is just familiarize yourself with this, okay? You don't have to study it, memorize it, but where it is helpful and important. Has anybody read this yet? No? Okay. So, please read it. Don't read it like it's a textbook and you have to memorize all the information. Read it like it's an informational document that can help inform you and give you context for your work, and especially for your project. What this is actually metadata analysis. In other words, instead of doing an analysis of a specific leadership program or curriculum, what they did was, this is a group, this again, it's the Flores, it's the same capital, the same Flores that did the capitals. Jan and Neil, Stacy, Bastian, and Elizabeth Mannion did kind of a meta-assessment. They took curriculum for community leadership development programs, and they basically kind of looked it over and they said, what are these curriculums, what are they providing? I mean, we've got a whole bunch of curriculums out there that are trying to develop leadership. So what is leadership? How do we define that? and how do we kind of start to understand what these different programs are offering. So what they did, and they give a little bit of an overview here of kind of what they are, how they're thinking about leadership development at a community level. And then they went through and started to try to tease apart what are these different curriculum offer. Okay, and so they looked at 14 different. Actually, that's not all. I think there's more. Curriculum, and basically these are community-based, again, leadership development curriculum. So a key takeaway is on page 12. And what happens on page 12 is they give an overview of their top leadership curriculum, and they decided to identify some categories that they wanted to track. And so you can see it actually, it's just even right on the front cover. Based on asset-based community development. What's asset-based community approach? What would that mean?
So asking the community what they do well, or what they already have, instead of what they don't have.
Awesome. Yep. So it's actually a whole strategy for community development. Kretzmann and McKnight, have you studied or followed any of that material? Kretzmann and McKnight are some authors of material called Asset-Based Community Development, or ABCD. And the asset-based community development approach is just exactly how you described it. It's saying, what are our positive attributes, or what do we bring to the community that we can build upon? Churches do this a lot. Organizations will do it. And what Kretzmann and McKnight did is that they brought it to a community level and basically said, what if we started asking people what some of their skills and talents are, and then kind of did a skill and talent assessment and started plugging people into areas that they have skills. And so what the asset-based community development would look at, though, is, for example, they may have a group of people that know traditions or language or culture, festivals, festivities. They may have recipes, they may be quilters, they may have all kinds of types of skills, cultural enhancement skills, that once they started looking at this, they thought, well, maybe we can start to use those to build up our community. Or they might be physical skills. And so if somebody is a plumber and somebody knows construction and somebody else is an electrician, they basically start to say, you know, we've got this guy over there with the roof, and we start connecting people to help enhance community. It's very similar to what churches do when they do an assessment of their membership and try to plug people into their areas of interest. But on this scale, it's for community improvement. An example of that is when I worked with a small community that basically found that they had a lot of artisans, very different, doing all different kinds of things. But what they decided to do as a community, recognizing that they had a number of very creative people, is that they took an empty building on Main Street and basically gave everybody like a little kiosk and made it an art kind of cultural center. So when you went in, what you saw is right here, these people had quilts that they made and they're for sale. The next booth had photographs. The next one, this guy was carving like toys out of wood, and so those were for sale. I mean, there were pictures that were, what was really cool about this was some guy was making fireplaces that burned the corn cobs. And so you could buy a fireplace, you could have it handcrafted, you could have it, made for your house. There's this lady that found a mold, or not a mold, but a design for dulcimers. Do you know what dulcimers are? Yeah. Now your face is like, yeah, because you've heard of dulcimer, you might make that face too. No, it's a stringed instrument that's kind of, just like I did this tournament. But they started making this, and people in the neighborhood said, that's pretty cool. I'm like, hey, what? How do you play it? They said, well, we'll start lessons. So they started doing lessons. Well, so they said, we ought to create a little dulcimer band so that we can play. So they started on Friday nights in the park, in the neighborhood, having a concert. This is a very small town that had no concerts. So basically what happened is that out of one idea sprung another that led to another that led to Friday night entertainment in the park. The bar loved it because it was right next to the bar and people would go get drunk. The cafe stayed open later on Friday nights because typically they would close up. But, they just started to make a thing of it. And so they started bringing people downtown, either because they were playing and had family members or else they were just interested in going and having a good time. So again, what it is it's asset-based community development. It's looking at what are the skills, talents, and the people of the community, maybe cultural knowledge that people bring, and then how do you use that to leverage it to help improve community. So there would be education and outreach lessons. Okay, so that's one thing that they look for in this is asset-based community development. Who is using those approaches? A second was degree to which they focus on poverty reduction. And again, as you read the introduction, it'll help you understand why that was a primary focus and why they brought that out. A third area was the degree to which they took a strategic approach. In other words, are they just developing leadership skills for leadership skills' sake? You go out, you're a better person, good for you. Now go change the world. Or did the community curriculum actually encourage them in some way to engage with planning and project activity? So did they include vision? Did they include skills for organizing people and getting them together? And why is that important? And then also the fourth key area was about leadership development curriculum that included inclusivity. And so that's actually the question that Evan started out with today. So why is diversity or being inclusive important when you're doing a local community program? So they went through and then actually scored all these different curriculum based on kind of how they met those criteria. Why would this be valuable or important? Say what?
So it's in the context of community capacity building.
Yeah.
I think as far as like the asset-based community assessment, in order to like figure out the potential to grow, you need to figure out what you have. And
Right.
and I think that, I think it's essential to know, because if you just, either you just go with it without really figuring out what you have, you either waste assets or you get down the road and realize you don't have something you need. I don't know, that's all I have.
No, that's good.
Along
That's
those
good.
same lines, you can end up with taking people, if you're assuming they don't have these skills or abilities or assets, and they do, and nobody bothered to ask them. They'll kind of
Right.
draw a wedge in the community, you didn't bother to ask us what we had or what we needed, so you just assumed and jumped in and ran with it.
Right. Why else would this type of project be valuable?
I think it's also an approach that any community can take. Everybody has some type of asset, therefore it's an approach that fits every type of.
Yeah, the asset-based community development process, yes. Yeah. What I mean is even more broadly, these guys did a meta assessment. They looked at a whole bunch of different leadership curriculum. What value does that have?
I guess you would have evidence of what works or what didn't work. So if you were trying to develop a program, you were going to like the Chamber of Commerce, this is what we want to do. Well, here's research to back up that this actually works and it actually is giving results.
So that's awesome, Dana. So what happens curriculum here. Okay, we use, it's like, great. What this program did is basically said, you know, not all leadership programs are created equally. Some have strengths in some areas, others have strengths in other areas, and depending on how you put it together, a leadership development curriculum can be more advantageous to some communities than others. And how do you know, and what do you look for? And they basically went through, they assessed it, they teased it out, and they said, so we're seeing that some of these curriculum are really strong in asset-based community development, some are strong in poverty reduction, some are strong in two other areas. And some are almost all economic development, but that wasn't it. It was anti-poverty, asset-based. I need to check my. Oh, which ones focus on inclusion or inclusivity? And yeah, a strategic approach versus just a leadership approach. So in the last test when we asked you about the difference between leadership development programs and community leadership development programs, it's saying that in a way that was kind of a precursor. This came out before the book did. But saying that, you know, if you're really looking at developing a community or leadership within the community, you might want to put it in the context of giving them a plan or help them create a plan of how they're going to kind of strategically approach making community change. So, I present that to you. I hope you'll read it. It's online. I want you to either download it or at least look at it. You don't have to know what all the curriculum are that they looked at, or even which one was strong for this or that or the other thing. That really isn't as important as much as, to me, the value of this is that they stepped back and they said, not all leadership program curriculum are created equal. Some are going to work in some areas and others aren't going to work in other areas. So how do you know which one to choose? That's exactly what we do. How do we know which curriculum to choose to give to Winchester program?
Surveys versus the.
You start by asking, what is it that you hope to do? Are you trying to reduce poverty? Are you trying to help engage people in strategic planning to make a better future for your community? Are you trying to build based on your current assets? If so, these curriculum over here are strong in that area. These aren't as strong. These are in this other area. These aren't as strong. So you start to be able to make some informed choices about how you align and coordinate the curriculum that you're developing for a community. Make sense? Okay, so I'll tell you what, that is an often not found and brilliant document just because of that. And most places don't. It's the first assessment, actually maybe the only assessment I know of, where somebody actually tackled looking at multiple, and I think there's a bunch in there, leadership development programs, and started to try to characterize or tease out what their strengths were and what areas they might be. Okay, so prepare for that for the test. I mean, you want to look at that. I'll go over what's going to be on the test next week. The other reading that was due already, and I don't think anybody's covering this, are they?
I'm the first one. Yeah, she's part one.
You are doing part one? Okay, and that'll be after the, no,
That'll be Tuesday.
that'll be awesome, because that'll be on the test. So I'll let you talk about this. I mean, not now, but,
Right.
but I want you to look at this, because part one is really the foundation, the narrative foundation of why community leadership is important and why this book was written. I mean, basically, it makes some assumptions about sharing leadership in a community context. And then, after a couple of quick introductory so part one talks about the core competencies of community leadership and why that's important. And I won't rain out your presentation on Tuesday, but that's pretty important about kind of the foundational understanding understanding of why the book was written and why that they think that you can develop leadership within a community. Part two are tools. Part three is about tools, and part four is about tools. So part one is really the kind of the foundation piece, and from there, the rest of this book is just resources that you might use to be able to reach your goals. So I won't go on much about this because I'll let you talk about it next Tuesday. But I will say, okay, now, for the test.
So I don't need to do the introduction?
Was that what you recovered?
No, just
No.
part one.
Part one,
Okay.
right. No. Unless something in the introduction just really speaks to you. Sometimes introduction is important, but in this case, it really isn't. So next Thursday, when you come back to class, it's another 100 point. It's only 5 questions. It's over this section 1. This sections.
3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Or 4, 5, 6.
Wow, do not read this. It's not over the introduction, section 1.1 and 1.2.
3 through 6.
Yeah, it's 3 through 6, and that's bizarre. Because I changed that. I did use Test 1 study guide as a template, but I changed it. Apparently, it didn't get saved for the one I got printed. So mark on your page, it's not introduction, section 1.1 and 1.2. It's sections 1.3 through 1.6.
What did you say was the point?
3 through 6. And the other document that has been the assigned reading is this one. So the one that we were just talking about together. So if you've read the chapters and you have confidence in basically what that message is, you should be able to explain the correlation between community leadership programs and community engagement, social cohesion, and civic engagement. That's PIG. Gasteyer, Martin, Appolia, and Keating. You should be able to describe the importance of facilitating social engagement for a community leadership program. A lot of that is CRILE. In other words, that's what you're going to be covering, I think. It's actually both. It's kind of conceptually out of both this book and what they've been talking about here in terms of why social engagement makes a difference. So if I asked you that today, could you answer that? Okay.
College try.
There you go. That's all it takes. List and describe 3 core competencies of community leadership. That's definitely the crowd book that you cover for Tuesday. And list and describe the ways that community leadership curriculum have been analyzed. And by that, yeah, that's this. And that's what we just talked about in terms of how do they categorize or how do they analyze different curriculum. And actually, I think that's, so that's even the sample question. According to Flora, Bastian, and Manning, what characteristics can be used to analyze community leadership curriculum? And why are those important?
I think to be an effective sample question, it should actually be on the test.
It may be.
I think that would be a really good idea.
So how would you answer that?
I don't know yet, but I will know by Tuesday.
There you go. Good, good, good.
Thursday, yeah.
Next
Yeah,
Thursday.
Thursday.
Was it the 4 digits listed?
Mhm.
Okay.
That's how they characterized it, and that's how they assessed you, right. But, so why are these important? Why would they have groups that are developing leadership curriculum around those? So what questions do you have?
Besides reading the material and just generally having a knowledge of it, how would you study for the test? If like we weren't happy with our last period?
Sure. I'd say if you could, a good way to study is if you've got somebody that you can, it doesn't hurt to pair up with somebody else that's in the class and talk it through or write out. I know you don't have the questions yet that you're answering, but actually, even these bullets. So how would you write a page? What's the correlation between community leadership programs, community